Up till now, we have a layered API architecture developed in Asp.net Core. It has an API controller layer that talks to business logic layer, that talks to data access layer, which eventually talks to database to collect data from the database. We used Entry Framework Core to develop our data access layer, and in particularly, we used Entry Framework Code First approach. As shown in the diagram, we have a controller layer that is dependency injecting the business logic layer. And the business logic layer is actually dependency injecting the data access layer. And then the data access layer is having repositories per entity. And the data access layer is using Entry Framework Code First to actually make a connection with the database and return the entities. So if we run this application, we have something like this. As you can see, we have this route API/account/getAll, which is fetching some accounts from the database. Right now, we just have two main properties, account number and account title. But this is just a sample. Moving forward, we'll add more properties as per our business logic. On the UI, we have an Angular application, and this Angular application right now just have a side nav and a toolbar, which was developed in previous lectures. And then it has some empty components and some route enabled against those components. So for example, if we go to a route called manage accounts, a blank component loads. If we go to a route called open accounts, a blank component load, and same is for the dashboard. In this lesson, we are going to connect this backend API with the front end, and we are going to write a injectable service in Angular, which is going to call the RESTful APIs. And it is going to show these account titles inside a component. Let's say the manage accounts component. It is going to show these titles in a list on this component. This component of manage accounts is going to have a lot more than that, but right now this is just an exercise in order to connect the backend RESTful services with our front end, and we just want to make sure that our front end is able to call the backend RESTful services. So in order to do that, let's go to our front end project and let's create a service using the Angular CLI command. It's something like ng generate service, and we are going to call it it's called ng generate service, and we are going to call it REST API service. So the service is created right here. This is our REST API service, and in order to use this service, we are going to add it in the list of providers, and we are just going to resolve the reference. The first thing we are going to set up in this service is the API base URL. So for that, we are just going to do API URL, and it is http://localhost, and our URL is actually 44339. The APIs are exposed at this port. So after setting this, we are going to dependency inject HTTPClient, which is from Angular. This is going to actually used to make the HTTP calls. So let's incorporate this one. It is going to be coming from Angular common.http, And let's set up some default headers for our HTTP communication. We are going to set up headers like this. It's going to be simply content type application JSON. The first function this service is going to have is get all accounts. This is going to return an observable of account, and observable is actually a data type from RxJS. And notice that we are trying to return account, but account right now was only a property, only a class in our C# project in Asp.net Core. So we are going to take a similar kind of approach, and we are going to create a client-side class to consume these accounts, which will be returned from the backend. For that, we are going to create a folder called models. In this folder, we are going to have all of our client-side entities. So let's create the first one, call it account.ts, and it's going to have an ID property, which will be a string. Then we are going to copy other properties name from here. It's going to have an account number property. Let's make it match the case of TypeScript, and this is also going to be a string. And then another one is going to be account title. This one is also going to be a string. We are going to return using this HTTP service we just injected. We are going to make a get call on the RESTful API, and we are expecting it to return something of type account. And then the URL we are going to hit is the API URL plus API slash it's going to be this one. This is the URL which we are trying to hit. And then we are going to bundle this up using pipe operator, and we are going to retry it one time, and then if there is an error, we are going to catch that error, and we are going to log that error. Or we can just simply create a new error handler like this dot handle error, and these things retry and catch error are also RxJS operators. So we are going to pull it from RxJS, and this error handler can be simply created like this. And for now we're just going to log this error, but we can do a bunch of stuff here as well. We'll look at it later. And we are going to return a throw error, and this throw error is also from observable RxJX. In order to consume this service, I'm going to go to the manage accounts component because this is the place where we are going to list the name of actually the account titles. We are going to list the account titles in this component. So what we are going to do is that we are going to dependency inject our REST API service which we just created. Actually, we didn't have to put the name service here, so I can simply remove this service here. So then let's import it, and then I have to just do the same here. Actually, Angular CLI automatically adds the word service after the name you have selected. So let's save everything. So we have dependency injected the service we just created. We are going to take a local variable and then this is actually going to be the account array. On the initialization of this component, we are going to actually call get all accounts, and then the return of it we are going to the response of it we are going to subscribe it to. We have to get the response from the backend and assign it to our local variable accounts. In order to do that, we are going to use RxJX pipe operator. Pipe operator is used to bundle multiple RxJS operations in a sequence. So we are going to use it like this. What we are doing here is that we are piping and then intercepting the response from the backend. And then whatever comes from the backend, we are going to assign it to a variable called accounts, which is of type account array. But in our get all accounts, if we go back there, we see that it is returning accounts and not accounts array. So we are just going to change it to actually return accounts array because that's what it is going to return. And then we are going to consume the returned variable. We are going to log it, whatever is being returned, just to check what the properties of arrays that are being that will be returned from the backend. And then we are going to subscribe to it. And then in order to use this service, we have to do one more thing, is that we have to make sure that the HTTPClient module is also imported in our app.module. I have already done that, but make sure that you also do it if you're following along. So now what we have is that once this component will be initialized, it's going to make a backend call, and the return of that backend call is going to be an accounts array that will be stored in a local variable called accounts. In order to show that the list of accounts, we are going to use HTML list, and the way we are going to use is that it's going to be started with UL tag, but the list, the li tags inside this are going to be looped around. So I'm just going to add a sample of it, but in our case our variable is called accounts, and then this li tag is going to be placed number of as many number of accounts that are being returned from the backend. And then the property which we are going to show here is called account title. So this is the property that will be shown here. Let's save everything. One more change is that we actually are making a HTTPS call instead of HTTP. So let's save that as well. Now let's run what we have. So we are here, and the moment we are going to navigate to the manage accounts component, in its initialization we are actually making a backend call using an injectable REST API which we just created, and then that API is actually going to hit this URL. So let's make sure that the URL is working. Actually not here. So yes, this URL is working. So the moment we go there, I am expecting an error, and that is actually a course error, cross origin request error. So what's actually happening is that we are trying to access a RESTful API from a different origin. So we have to enable in Asp.NET Core, we have to enable cross origin requests. In order to do that, we will stop our service, and in startup.cs we are going to add a course policy. It is actually explaining that if some origin starts with localhost 4200, we will the API will allow it to access any method using any header. So this URL localhost 4200 is actually a URL of our UI. So now when our UI is going to try to access the API, it will let it allow, because we have mentioned in our API settings that anything that begins with localhost 4200 is allowed. We are going to use this policy in the configure section of startup, and now if we run it and refresh our front end, and the moment we try to go to manage account, it is going to make a backend call, which is not successful, and we are able to see our two account titles, which were actually coming from this API, which is eventually coming from the database we created. With this, we have our Angular front end talking to Asp.NET Core backend, and is able to fetch the records in the database using API exposed in Asp.NET Core.